This is the Stay Healthy Experience, hosted by Robert Ferguson. That's me, of course, and the lady to my right, Miss Barbara Kris,
yes,
aka BK for Burger King every once in a while, and my man all the way from New York, Mr. Daniel Baldwin.
Yes.
And let me tell you, today's exciting because we all are happy that you're in the room. I mean, we have the nanny of all nannies.
I know.
The Windy City Nanny. She flew in from Chicago.
Just for us.
Of course.
Woo!
What other reason would there be? No, not that the sunshine at all is appealing.
Right.
Here in Chicago. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, it's happy to have you here. And I know we have
Thank you.
1,000 questions for you today. And we have thousands of questions I'm sure they're going to be coming in from people wanting to get your advice on things.
I'll only give you 5.
That's it.
But you look like you're, I mean, and I say this with the utmost respect. You could pass for 18, 19, 20 years of age.
I know. See?
And you're this nanny with all this knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Give us the background. How did you become the nanny of all nannies?
Well, the nanny of all nannies. I like that. I'd like to coin that now.
Yeah.
So really, I've always loved children. When I was 11, I started as a mother's helper, like a lot of young girls do. And that was a catalyst to me becoming a babysitter and then eventually a nanny. But when I was a little girl, I used to tell my mom that I wanted to go to have a baby at the hospital. And I remember her looking like, what does that like mean? What's she been watching? What's she been doing? And so I meant that I wanted to go to the toy store and get a baby doll or buy me a baby doll. So she did, not all the time, but when she did, she did. And we'd come home and I'd make birth certificates for all of my baby dolls, like a crazy person, I think. Kind of. So I just loved kids from a young age. And so when I became a nanny, obviously years later, it was a natural fit for me. I always felt that nannies or caretakers or anyone who was taking care of children in a capacity that allowed for you to be some sort of role model or have an influence on a child's life, I remember thinking, man, that is so important. That is so awesome. That's like a really heavy weight to bear on yourself to think that you have that power to influence. And I took it really seriously. So I was so honored to have that role for 15 years.
And as a kid, you felt like that.
I remember feeling that way probably when I was about 12 or 13, because you see how the kids start to attach to you and attract to you and use you as a confidant. And I remember thinking, this is cool. This is special, and you should really honor it. And that I didn't know the words back then necessarily that I'm describing it now as, but I knew that it felt important. And I think in life we all just want to feel understood and valued and loved. And I felt that I got more from being a nanny than those kids ever got from me.
Now, what's the difference between being a babysitter and being a nanny?
Oh, good question.
Well, the world today, 64% of families in America have a nanny or a caretaker. I mean, listen, think about that. 64% is a lot, right? And so everybody has this idea that nannies are, Upper East Side of New York and, they're not raising their kids. And that's not what it is today. Redefining nanny is so important. And to me, a nanny or a babysitter or caretaker, it's really a blanket phrase for just anyone taking care of your child in your absence. So when I say nanny, I could be talking about maybe someone that lives in your home or an au pair, or I'm talking about a grandparent that's helping, during the day, raise your kids. But it's anyone who's there in the absence of their parent.
Okay, that's a good question.
Wow,
that's
64%.
64, and it's rising in line with the employment rate. So I always say this is not a trend. This is part of our culture today. And we're it's Super Tuesday today, so we're seeing all the politics and what they're talking about on their platforms. And a lot of the common denominator that you see, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. They're talking about childcare and the childcare crisis, and that's a big part of what I'm trying to not fix, because I don't think I can fix it, but help alleviate, yes. And how do you alleviate the child care crisis? It's looking and seeing what's going on in our world today. And that statistic of 64% completely indicates what's going on in terms of the child care crisis, that people need help raising their kids, and families are built differently today, but that doesn't necessarily matter. All that matters is that unification of knowing that you don't have to do it alone and you can ask for help.
Okay, now
that's a good
there's a cultural thing that's in my head right now, because I'm African American. If you hadn't figured that out.
What are you going to drop now? What are you
No,
going
I'm
to
gonna
drop?
say, and I know Daniel's sitting there going, I'm the other Baldwin actually. The one that
I'm chomping at the bit where this is going, man. I'm ready.
I know.
Well, I mean, but from a cultural standpoint, I don't know hardly any African Americans that have someone living in their house that's given the baton to be able to dictate how the kids are being raised.
I would say that it's not just in the African American culture. It's today. It's not that someone's living in your house taking care of your children in place of you. It's this idea of a village. I always go back to these three prongs of you need to build a village, you need to ask for help, and you need to let love in. So when you're talking about culturally what happens, I mean, look at me being Italian growing up. My grandparents lived with us. My mom's parents, who's here today.
Mom's in the house.
Yeah.
Watching everything I say.
Right.
She'll have notes
Like
for
this.
me later and be like, don't ever say that again. But so, I mean, her parents lived with us growing up. I mean, I shared a bed with my grandmother for many years, and they were the loves of my life. They taught me probably the best qualities I could have ever learned in order to be a nanny from taking care of my grandparents. But that being said, my mom never had a nanny in our house. I was raised by my mom
Your
and
family.
my grandparents.
Okay,
Yes.
see,
Yeah, I
I'm
get that.
starting to get it now because inside of my home, even growing up, when mom was working, oftentimes my aunt would be living in the house. Sometimes it would be my uncle.
Yeah.
So uncle could be a nanny.
Of course.
Okay.
So yeah,
get it.
I like
Of course.
that, and that's
Yeah.
how I'm growing up the same way too. I didn't have my grandparents living here. That I had grandparents in Italy and in the Philippines, but with our kids, my parents help. My older brother and sister, we help when we can.
Right,
And but I know culturally, it was very much that if you could keep it inside the family, that was key. Like
Right.
to have to go outside, there was
Right.
almost like there's
We
something
had,
not quite right,
yeah.
We had the Irish nanny, which was the big wood soup spoon, and my mother would say, "Get your ass up in that room and don't come back down." And if you back down, you got the wood spoon.
That's not a bad tactic, Daniel. I mean, that definitely puts the fear in you. I don't ever got this. My nana would have never taken the spoon to us, even though that was something that was threatened. It was never necessarily something they would do. But this idea, like you said, of redefining what a nanny is today, that's exactly what it is. It's looking at your village and who's in it that you're including. But not everybody's as lucky as we were to have a village of grandparents and aunts and uncles and all these people. So what about these people that don't have family? How do they grow their village? And they kind of have to make their own family.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of also what I talk about with parents about how you ask for that help, because that's not oftentimes a very easy ask.
See, I totally get it because growing up where I grew up, the difference between then and now, and I believe this is for all of us, is that the lady down the street played a big role in how we were raised. I mean, there was people on my street growing up that would spank you if they saw you out of line.
oh really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Dang, yeah.
Because it was a village.
Yeah.
And, we could run around and the kids had a great time. We were outside. And now I hear my daughters saying all the time, Daddy, I wish we could run around the way you talk about how you guys used to run around.
Yeah.
It's different today, isn't it?
Yeah, for
Raising
sure.
children. I think technology plays into it. There's a lot of differences. I always say you kind of have to find that way to have old school meet new school.
Yeah.
And that balance seems to be difficult. Balance seems to be difficult across many different arenas in life, but especially with childcare today, because I think when you grow up, my mom had a really good phrase. She said, take what we did right as parents and use it. Take what we did wrong and lose it. And it depends on what you felt was beneficial for you. But oftentimes we see you kind of going to the extreme of, kind of the polar opposites. It's, I hated what happened in my childhood in this way, so now I'm going to go totally extreme on the other end. And
Right.
then how does that affect your children? If you could have a more balanced approach to taking the things that worked and didn't work and being more cognizant of kind of weighing the pros and cons of that, I think it would be helpful. But we swing on this pendulum in such an extreme way that I think we see the consequences of that more so today.
Yeah. I mean, and do you see, so you were talking about redefining nanny. It's almost like, do you think that it had a kind of a negative connotation before?
Not even negative, I would say, Barbara, just kind of an uneducated definition attached to
Yeah.
it. Like Nanny Diaries, Scarlett Johansson, remember that movie, Mr. and Mrs. X? She was a nanny on the Upper East Side. And it was one of those movies where everyone was like, oh, this is what's happening. This is what's happening in society. No one's raising their children, and this is only for the rich and famous and all of that. And it would drive me crazy because I'm like, that's not happening in small town Iowa. That's not it. But someone's helping those kids. Someone's helping that family. So it kind of like just like this moment with me where I was like, we really need to redefine this because it's not helping anyone. They think it's just a bougie term for, someone that's raising your kids, and it's not. It needs to be more applicable to what's actually going on, like the temperature of society. So that's really what I've made a big platform, is trying to figure out how to identify who those people are in your life to help you raise your kids.
Okay. Well, I got some questions. I want to go deep here.
Okay.
You're being someone who would be invited into someone else's house, and they're trusting that you're working with their kid. Do you have training in your past that helps you from a psychological standpoint, or is it a gift that it's just innate as part of who you are, and you have these words of wisdom where you build the trust with the parents, and then you have this ability to convey information to the kids to get them to do things that sometimes the parents can't do? And then, of course, you're teaching the parents. I want to go there because so many parents could benefit from getting wisdom from someone who has the skill set to help them be a better parent and to help show them how they can get their kids to do things that is very difficult to do sometimes.
Well, thank you. I love that question. I think it's multifaceted. So, kind of working through it. I'll start with the funny part of it. I was not like a classically trained nanny. I didn't like go to nanny school. I was a performance theater major in college. So that's not a child psychologist.
Go Bradley. Go Bradley.
That's right. Go Bradley. So, I did that. And so I never went to school thinking I needed to make sure I had this childhood emphasis in my education because I knew what I was. At that time, I was already nannying. I nannied for all my college professors when I was away at school. So I kind of had that kind of full experience already as a nanny going on at the time. But when I was studying, I didn't think that was necessarily something I was going to focus on. So my love for children obviously started at a young age, but I never felt that I needed to go and get additional education other than CPR training or skills like that, because infant CPR is different than toddler CPR.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that I was well educated in that way. But what I found when entering into these families and being with them for many years, that trust was a big word that needed to be understood by all parties. I always talk about the trifecta: the parents, the nanny, and the children. And this trifecta really needs to be worked on constantly. There needs to be open communication. In order to make that trifecta work, there's a lot of different variables. And so when I went into the family, I knew I needed the trust of the parents and I needed the trust of the children. But it got a little hairy sometimes because the children would come to me and trust me about things that they necessarily wouldn't trust their parents about.
Right.
So like to your point, Robert, you're seeing a different part of their world and you're seeing stuff that the parents don't see sometimes. And I can give you an example. There was one little girl that was my nanny kid, and we were doing homework at the kitchen table one night, and she excused herself and went upstairs to the bathroom, and she was gone just a little too long. Like something was tugging at me to go up there and see her. So I went upstairs and I listened at the bathroom door, and I could hear her being sick.
How old was she?
She was only about, 9 at the time, 8 or 9 at the time. And so I asked if I could come in. I came in, and her face is all blotchy and red. She'd been crying, and she said, I just can't do it anymore, Florence Ann. I can't do it. It's too much pressure. It's too much pressure. And basically what happened was her parents had put so much pressure on her academically that she just couldn't take it anymore. And I, of course, was so upset, but I wanted to try to calm her down. So we laid on the bathroom floor, and she started opening up to me about how she felt that she wasn't good enough, and she didn't know what to do. And she was a smart kid. I mean, this is a straight A student. So I left that night, and I didn't say anything to the parents. And later I thought, okay, you have to confront them. But how do you confront them and also keep the trust of the child?
Right.
And so I decided to go to them and say, listen, I want to work on this with you. What can we do to solve this problem? Never attack them, never wanted them to be on the defense. Just say that I saw what was going on, and I just wanted to make sure they were aware, and I was there to help them figure it out. They
Right.
were very nice about it, said, thank you for telling us. We didn't realize. So it worked out where I kept her trust and was able to do things with her to help build her self-esteem and help build her confidence. And the parents were able to start like loosening the reins a little bit and showing her that they were proud of her and that she was doing a good job. So that was probably one of the most moving experiences I ever had as a nanny, because I was probably only 16 at the time this happened. And I was young. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't know necessarily how to handle such a traumatic situation. But then I'll fast forward years later. I saw her at a wedding, my little nanny kid. She ran up to me with tears in her eyes and said, "You're still the voice in my head all these years later."
She
Nice.
remembers.
And
Wow.
so these moments that you think maybe don't affect them, they really do have a lot of effect, and they have a lot of impression.
Yeah.
And that's why I always say that this job as a nanny it's not just a job. It is really an honor. It's a privilege to be let into someone's life that way in the most vulnerable of situations.
Well,
Wonderful.
it can be amazingly influential. I know that my brother Billy's wife, China, her parents were both very, very famous singers from the band the Mamas and the Papas. And China, right on until it didn't even speak English really until she was like 5. She spoke Spanish as her first language. As deep as that's how much involvement that their Spanish speaking nanny had with them in Southern California. She didn't even speak English. It wasn't her first language.
Wow. And
That's pretty influential.
that is pretty
Yeah.
influential. I mean, to still, see what she was able to accomplish as a nanny from an emotional standpoint, which I think that work is so important. Clearly, those children felt loved and protected
For
and
sure.
secure. That's a huge part of being a nanny, is making them feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
that-
you're the. What's that, Daniel?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
yes.
I want to know more about your work at the Lurie's Children's Hospital.
Oh, I love that question, Danielle. It's one of my favorite philanthropic things that I'm involved in. So it's 4 years ago now, I joined the board of the Children's Research Fund at Lurie Children's Hospital. And Lurie is a big children's hospital in Chicago, nationally known. And they have a lot of different divisions and different boards. But our board does all the fundraising for the research that's done at the hospital. So we'll
Wow.
raise money to, I basically say, make the miracles possible. And we learn so much about what they're trying to do in terms of helping, cure things or alleviate things, whatever it might be that is ailing children today. Lurie is doing such amazing things in terms of medicine. But one of the most important things about being on that board, Danielle, is the idea that we really have to be in service of others in so many different ways in life. And children have always been important to me. And I always wanted to figure out how to best serve them if I can't be a nanny anymore, like in direct contact with kids. What can I do to help make their life better in the years to come? And what's your legacy after you're long gone? That's why being on a board like this is so important to me, Danielle, because it's work that's going to be done for years and years to come, and that eventually, maybe decades from now, you were part of the reason, all these kids are going to get to live, or that we're going to wipe out some sort of genetic disease or whatever it might be. And so to see these doctors and researchers come to Chicago to start these clinics to take on cancer and other diseases that when you see these children suffering and these families suffering, you just cannot believe how lucky you are. So it definitely puts life in perspective. So it's about the legacy for me.
Your work is so well documented in the field of autism. Does that cross over into what you do at the Children's Hospital as well?
It's a great question. So my brother has autism. He's 17 months younger than I am. He's the sweetest boy in the whole wide world. And so I had started a junior board. This was years ago when I first kind of started my own kind of philanthropic work for autism awareness.
Yeah.
And then when I joined Lurie, they did start talking about how a lot of researchers had been brought to work in kind of the wellness sector of Lurie. And now we're actually launching a new institute where they're going to be focusing on community health and autism falls underneath that. So that's going to be very interesting to see play out. Lori has one institute already, the Stanley Manny, and now this will be the second that they have, and it's going to be cross-pollinating a lot of really important work. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do in terms of autism. I've seen a lot of lectures thus far from different researchers, and it's been pretty compelling to see, because the statistic is staggering about how many children with autism are born today. I think it's 1 in 9. You can correct me.
Can you see everybody?
It's unbelievable. I'm sorry, Daniel, what did you say? Pardon?
I'm saying, can you see the monitor?
No, he can't.
No, I can't see the
No, we
monitor.
can't. We can't see you, Daniel.
But you can hear. Atticus, say hi to everybody.
Is that Attica?
Atticus?
Atticus?
I'm live on a podcast introducing
Hi, Atticus.
Well, hello, Atticus.
I know. Hi there.
That was my son, Atticus, who was born July 13th. He was due October 21st, back in 1994. And he is, I'm well versed in what you deal with your brother. My son, Atticus, is on the spectrum. And I have done a tremendous amount of work with Holly Pete and different people that I've been involved with on the West Coast, and have raised a son who's autistic.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, what they always say, that to know one autistic child is to know one autistic child. Wouldn't you have to agree with that? That they're all so different in terms of what makes them special and all of that.
Yes.
I mean, growing up, there's actually video footage of this. My brother, again, only 17 months younger than I am. I was doing an alphabet puzzle, and I'm like struggling, not totally sure where the letters go. My poor mother probably terrified and freaked out that I did not know how to do the alphabet by that point. And my brother walks in the frame of the video, and he's taking the letters out, and he's doing them out of order, knows the letters out of order. I could not have done that to save my life at that time. And when they would go to the pediatrician, my mom would be like, well, he's not talking too much, we don't know, kind of what's going on before his diagnosis. The pediatrician looked at my mom and goes, well, it looks like this one's doing a lot of talking. Does your son have any time to even talk with her around? So, I mean, but, so you never know. Sorry, Daniel?
I knew at the Vaughn's Market at Sunset and PCH, the place I'm talking by Gladstone's?
Yes.
Well, I'm in that market, and when my son would say, Dad, I need to tell that man something, or I need to tell that, I didn't argue anymore after this one time. There was a woman in front of me checking out, and then us and a couple behind us. And the couple behind us were probably about 45 years old. And they were doing that, arguing in the store, so you couldn't, trying to make it you not be able to tell they're arguing in the store. And she went, Tom, please. I don't. He's like, he's abrupting his words, and he's trying to and truncating things, but very loud. And finally he went, I just do. And she started to well up a little bit. And my son pulled on my pant leg. He was 4, and he said, Dad, I need to speak to that man. And I said, well, Atticus, do you really think that's a good idea? He seems a little upset. He goes, no, Dad, I need to speak to him right now. And I went, okay, bud. And he walked over, and the man had his back because he was still berating his wife. And Atticus pulled on his pant leg, and he looked down and he said, excuse me, sir, do you want to be happy? And the man looked at him, and the color left his face. And he said, yes, son, I want to be happy. And he looked at the woman and he said, do you want to be happy? And she exploded into tears. And he wrapped his arms around her. He put his ear on her tummy. He hugged her. He stepped back. He took both their hands to make them hold each other's hands. And he said, well, then you should be happy. And he
gosh.
And that's when I realized that although there were some things that through medical science or social judgment, they may have seen my son as being different in a negative way. But the evolution of that boy from a higher level spirituality-wise has been unsurpassed by any other human being I've known in my life.
Daniel, you're cheering me up over here. I have goosebumps. I mean, clearly Atticus, just that emotional intelligence, the EQ everyone talks about, that sensitivity that he has towards understanding the energy that other people are giving. that's very special. I mean, that he's that tuned in. I mean, my brother, when he was little, when my dad would get mad, my dad's forehead would wrinkle, and my brother would go up to him and try to smooth out his forehead because he wanted him to not be mad. Don't be mad.
Yeah.
You know, I should have tried that a couple times to make him not mad at me. But you know, my brother was very like a lot of children with autism are. They're very sensitive to anyone being unhappy, especially worried that they're unhappy with them. But what your son did, Danielle, is so moving. I will not forget that story. I think that's a great lesson for all of us to kind of treat people with that sort of, you know, delicate touch. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So you're the oldest.
I'm the oldest of four.
Oldest of four. Yes. So you just kind of naturally you were kind of a caretaker, I'm assuming.
Oh, I was the leader of the pack. Yeah. I needed to keep everyone in line, tell them what to do. I still do it now. I mean, if anything needs to be done, they're like, oh, Florence Ann will make that reservation, or Florence Ann will buy those gifts. And I'm like, well, you know, what's going on here? But, you know, you do learn to lead from, I think, a young age. But it's not just being the oldest. I think it also comes from kind of an innate part of you. I think we're not much different than we were when we were younger. If you were to watch videotapes at me at 5, I'm pretty much the same person at 34. So, you know, but I think leading is something, leadership, at least in general, is something I've learned a lot about as I've gotten older and businesses and things like that. But I think I probably learned about leadership through my time as a nanny, because they do look up to you to teach them, guide them, whatever it might be. So it does bring you to a different kind of moment of reflection about what leadership can be. Because, you know, we look at like kind of corporate America and what it used to mean to be a CEO and stuff, and you have to be tough, and you don't show any emotion or any of that. And I think as a nanny, you felt like you were leading, but you were leading with a lot of heart and a lot of emotional investment in people. So I think it changed how I feel, but I also see how it's permeating society and how leadership is changing with people and how they guide and lead. So I think that's pretty cool to see that shift in society about how we affect change.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the more you talk, so in my background, I've been a martial artist since I was 5 years old. And I'm around like the ultimate fighting type people. A lot of boxers I work with. You know, Steve was part of that journey and watched me do the work that I've done in that space. But I look at you right now, and I'm picking up this energy that you're the referee.
I like that.
So stay with me on this.
Does it come with a cute outfit? Because I'm in.
when you watch boxing, the referee is not there to be the limelight. When you watch a boxing match or an ultimate fighting championship, oftentimes you don't even realize the referee's there. And that's a good referee. Right. And so I'm thinking of you going into someone's home. You're the referee because you got the kids, and you've talked a little bit about that. Right. But I would like to hear some of your thoughts or experience as it pertains to some of the positives you've done for the parents. Because my gut is telling me that when you're in the home, that if there's a couple, their relationship probably gets better because you're there. They watch how you work with their kids, and it inspires them to become better at how they communicate. I just feel like you set the foundation that oftentimes in a lot of families is broken. And so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because I know Daniel, in the back of his mind, he's like, you know, I am a single guy, by the way. Yeah. And I've told him I may get a nanny. He's like, dude, you can't just get a nanny because you want to date them.
Oh, don't get me started about this.
You're waiting like 10 minutes to drop that, right? You were waiting this whole time.
Robert's waiting for me to approve it. He's like, yeah, if the nanny tells me it's all right.
You notice that Robert had to throw out to a national audience.
I know.
Because he's fishing, man.
We've embarrassed him. He's getting he's cheated on us. We've embarrassed him. He knows he's stepped a line here.
Are you the referee, or are you the coach?
Well, oh gosh, this is for a girl that was bad at sports, is a lot of sports. I was asked to quit track and field. My mom can attest to that. They were like, she's probably not meant for this. And she should also quit gymnastics and ballet and swimming and all those other things.
You're on me the damn coach.
Yeah, I'll find something else that I can do. Thank you very
much. It's an interesting identification. Robert thought that he sees you as the referee.
Coach. It is.
I see you as the
It's
coach.
more of a coach. I think it's very interesting. I think I probably have a split personality in that way. I think depending on the home I go into. It's funny you bring this up. So last year I launched a YouTube series called the Windy City Nanny, and I go into 12 different homes, different families across Chicago, and see what's going on in their childcare situation. And we dealt with so many different themes, whether it was a mom who has MS and she had not really talked to her son yet about what it was like to parent with a chronic illness, to another mom who really needed to learn self-care because she had lost her identity to motherhood and she didn't really know who she was anymore, and a father who was a widower, 2 young children, and wanted to be super dad and was having a really hard time letting people in to help. So we went through a lot of different categories of childcare and what the consequences are of not having a village or not letting love in or not asking for help. And so when I would go into these homes, Robert, I would probably, and to your point, Daniel, really feel more like a coach, because I would sit down with them on a couch and I would talk to them about what they were going through. But the work that I did with them, I felt I always wanted it to be much deeper. I always loved Jo Frost. She, she was the first kind of person to put, nannies and childcare, on TV all those years ago. And she was talking about the disciplining children. And when I wanted to launch this YouTube series, I really wanted it to be more, again, about that trifecta, about parents and nannies and children and what was going on in the childcare crisis today, and how do you actually help parents figure out those 3 prongs that I always mention. So I wanted it to be deeper. When I was sitting on the couch with those moms or those dads or whomever it was, I wanted to get to the soul of the matter, the heart of the matter, and get them to really open about what were they really struggling with and why were they having a hard time making decisions or asking for people to help them. And I always go back to Mary Poppins, the original Mary Poppins movie, even though Emily Blunt did a wonderful job in the revamp of that. The Mary Poppins was there to help the father. And I always think of my work as a nanny about the parents just as much as it is about the children, if not more, because I am there to help make all the puzzle pieces work. So in that way, Daniel, I do feel like a coach where I'm helping parents kind of step outside of themselves sometimes and look at the situation with new eyes. Sometimes you're too close to it. It's too emotional. They're your kids. And you need someone to come in and help kind of sort through those problems. I would say that a lot of what I have found in my work, especially today with so many people having nannies, there's a lot of guilt. Oh my gosh, the guilt, right? And you guys are single parents, right? So, and this might be.
I was going to ask that. I was going to ask, what are the? I have members of my own family. I don't have to name names, but I said to one of them recently, I go, "Have you ever changed the diaper? Do you even know what that's like?" and you know what? The answer probably was not in the last 10 years. No, I don't. And so are there inherent, I would imagine for me, my fear, because I'm in a place now with an apartment over my garage, Robert's been to my home. And I said, man, with travel and the stuff that Robert and I are working on with Barbara and other endeavors that I'm doing, I really could use a live-in nanny. I could, because if they were used to that person more, I would be able to leave a little more freely and not be that worried about the coverage for my kids. But I see inherent dangers in doing that. I have other family members and friends that, I don't think they're engaged the way I engage with my children. I think the kids are missing out with a connection.
Well, I always tell people that, a nanny is not there to replace you as a parent. I still expect parenting. That is always part of kind of my rule becoming a nanny. When you sit down and you talk to that nanny and you're interviewing them for the first time, that's something that I expect parents, if they believe that value, maybe they don't, but I believe that they should say, I'm not hiring you to be a replacement of me. I am hiring you to be an extension of me, the eyes, the ears, the heart. And the nanny themselves should stand up in the situation and say, I will not work for a family.
So have you had to do that? Refuse people?
I've never had to put my foot down and say, I'm not replacing you as a parent, but I have seen it happen. And I also knew that when interviewing to work for families, I was not going to work for a family that expected me to do that. It's not part of my value system. I didn't want that responsibility. But if it was a family, for example, that's out there that this is what the parents are going to do. They need a nanny that's going to step in there and replace them as a parent in some sort of big way. Then then I am so happy that there are nannies out there that are willing to do that really hard work. I'm just not the nanny for that, because I have an issue value-wise being able to get on board with that, because I really do expect parenting at the end of the day as well, and it'd be a team effort. So there's the sports analogy again, going back to whether I'm a coach or a referee, but
you
know,
have
there's
your
no I in
standards.
team. Yes, exactly.
So
But,
I'm going to try.
Oh.
I'm going to try to be quiet after this question, but I just need an answer so I can satisfy something that I have going on between. Is Robert asking the nannies that could potentially work for him for pictures in a bikini inappropriate or not?
If you can find a nanny that's willing to do that, I want her number. I would like
that's
to
what Ferg
talk
said.
to her about that, because remember, all those nannies out there listening, anyone is, that nanny's there to take care of your children, not to take care
Right,
of you.
Ferg.
That's
So,
right.
I'm
Right.
going to be rotating nannies. So,
That's right.
you know,
It's
all
not a
good.
dating service, Robert. I
He doesn't have.
She's
his-
like, hey.
I gotta,
know. But you know what? Now you bring up a good point, Danielle, about that, though. This is always the number one question I get. Can you
Is it?
hire a hot nanny? Yes, Robert, can you hire a hot nanny? That's what everyone always says to me. And of course you can hire a hot nanny. You don't need to sleep with that nanny.
Hell, yeah,
That's
that's
not what you're
right.
supposed to be doing.
yeah, Robert.
It's not-
I mean, see, it's turned on me. I should have never said it.
I know. He's like, get the fire off of me.
I know.
But I mean, that's the truth, is you can hire a hot nanny. And I'll tell you what, and not that I think at all that I fall in that category, but I had a small experience with this when the last nanny family
You're
that I was
hot.
with. Oh, you're very sweet. Thank you. But I came into the living room, and my employer, the woman, was there with her friends. And I came in to get the baby, and I was like, hi, everyone. Hi. So I took the baby, and I go in the kitchen, and I hear my employer's friend say to her, oh my gosh, she's your nanny?
Yeah.
You would let her alone with your husband? And so the employer, God bless her, looks at her and goes, oh, please, she wants nothing to do with my husband. And so I'm in the kitchen cracking up. But, I understand why this question exists, because you look at all the magazines and they sensationalize it. They're
Yes.
like, oh, so-and-so's, cheated with their nanny. They cheated with their nanny. They cheated with their nanny.
Yeah.
So now America thinks, oh, this is what happens everywhere. Everyone's cheating with their nanny. And
Yeah.
that's not the truth. And it drives me absolutely insane, because it gives nannies such a bad reputation. And then you feel, oh, it's not a trustworthy situation. And a nanny really should be one of the best hires you make, or assets to your family, if you're doing it correctly and for the right reasons. But I feel that's why, again, we're redefining what nanny
For
is,
because
because we've sensationalized it in a way that is so negative.
Well,
I know it.
you set things up pretty well in the very beginning when you said trust. And then you just mentioned something that made me think of Kobe Bryant. Shaq at one of the celebration of Kobe's life. Shaq shared this moment he had with Kobe when the team was playing and Kobe would never pass the ball, and so all the teammates went over to Shaq and says, "Hey man, can you tell Kobe to start passing?" And so Shaq goes over to Kobe Bryant and says, "Hey man, can you start passing?" And he talked about this is a team and there's no I in it, and Kobe basically said, yeah, there's no I, but there's an M and an E.
And you said something else though. How do you end it though? There's an M-E.
Yeah, there was I took out the curse word.
Yeah.
But bringing up Kobe, I would love your perspective. If you were a nanny in a home and the family's a big Laker fan and you have this horrible thing that happened to these 9 people, and with Kobe Bryant being the girl dad that he was, what advice could you give to help nurture the young kids who are dealing with this? Because I mean, it really affected me. And I don't even watch basketball.
I know.
But it was the fact that I'm a dad of 2 daughters. And, I know Daniel and I, we've had many conversations about this. I mean, I know it affected you.
Oh, yeah.
I've met people. People are still hurting.
For sure.
What could you share that could help some of these people be better parents for their kids going through it as well as themselves?
I think that loss is loss, no matter what the situation is. Even when I lost my grandparents, you feel like a part of you breaks because it's someone that you love so dearly. But then you add a level of tragedy to it, of devastation. You know, when your grandparents die, they're older and you expect maybe that, you know, that's what's going to happen. But what happened with Kobe and his daughter and all those other people, that's unexpected. And it's when something is shocking and you feel that someone has been stolen from you, right? That's how death feels often, that they are taken from you, stolen, their life cut short. I always say that you kind of have to learn to live with a broken heart. And that's not that you don't laugh or love again or anything or live again, but there's a part of you that's cracked that never is totally repaired. But I also think there's beauty in the breakdown with that crack within you. There's a better chance for you to develop sympathy and empathy and all of these amazing things that maybe you would not have felt if you had not gone through an experience like that. So not to put a positive spin on it at all, but I think when you are talking to children about loss in whatever way it is, they are going to process that loss very differently. But I think the option that you have at that time is how you are moving through grief in whatever stages they are, as slowly as you're going through it or as intensely or aggressively as you're going through it. There's an opportunity for learning there with your children about how do you handle situations that make you feel out of control. Where do you find the control when you feel that way? And how can you teach children that by feeling all of these feelings, you are going to be a better friend, a better partner, a better mother, husband, whatever it is, later in life, because you've had the experience of dealing with great loss that opened you up to like a different level of yourself.
Yeah.
So not to talk too much like on a spiritual level, but I think the idea, Robert, of having an open conversation about feelings with your children and letting them see you vulnerable as well is very important, because you don't want kids to think that it's not okay to feel or to emote something. And they also are looking at you to guide them through it, but they also want to know that you yourself are human and that you yourself feel. And that if you can do that, then you give them permission to do it as well. So it's a horrible thing, a horrible lesson that is being learned, but it's also a beautiful bonding moment for you and the children, whether it's the parents or the nannies that are helping as well, be able to work through something that is greater than us.
I'm sitting
Yeah.
here like listening. I'm listening to your words. I'm like, where do you come from? Like, you're like reincarnated, like Dr. Laura 2 lives ago.
Yeah, she's got exactly.
Jeez.
Yeah,
That's
great.
I love that.
Like
compliment.
wisdom.
Oh gosh.
And you're speaking about like the feelings, because I have a 15-year-old son, and even though, you know, thank goodness we haven't had to experience loss like that, but you know, as a teenager and dealing with emotions, and then as a mom trying to keep that open communication and that trust level. I mean, that's can be challenging, especially to keep those lines open. I mean, what kind of advice would you give?
You're at a tough age, though. 15
Yeah.
is a tough age for that, I think, no matter
Yeah.
what. But I think it starts in the sandbox, I always say, a lot of what goes on with parenting. You know, it's funny. I'm not a parent myself. I get this question a lot. I have no children. And then, of course, I get like, you know, the haters are like, why are you telling me what I should do with my kids when you don't have any kids? And I'm like, okay, do you know how many families I meet? They've never changed a diaper before and they're parents for the first time. And, you know, I'm like, I think I know maybe a
thing
or two about it. But, you know, at that age, at 15, I know, I can tell by your energy and your spirit and all of that, that you were a beautifully loving mom and generous soul from the very beginning. But I feel, at least with my own children, I would want to start that, like I said, in the sandbox, about making sure they knew I was a soft place to land.
Right.
I always say that. And my mom was always that for me growing up, that I knew that no matter what my question was, that she would listen with an open heart and a non-judgmental mind, even if her face kind of spoke differently about it. You could tell. She was, her face said one thing, but she was like, I'm going to
Was she holding the wooden spoon?
No, wooden spoon that she was holding, but a face that was like, this isn't her cup of tea. But again, a soft place to land is important, and I think children need to understand that they can learn from you, they can feel protected by you, and I think that's what opens up the communication. That's what opens up the trust, is knowing that no matter what happens to me in my life, there's someone I can go to or people I can go to that will help me. And my mom would always say, it doesn't mean you're not going to be in trouble. Doesn't mean there's not going to be punishment or whatever it is. Now, that alone could be enough for a reason why a child wouldn't want to come to you, because like, I don't want to get punished.
Right.
I don't want to be in trouble. So I would say that it's not necessarily about saying that, doesn't mean that there aren't consequences that are going to come. It's at a young age knowing that the child can have questions. And I think that was something that my dad didn't do as well as my mom did. My dad never really wanted us to question anything. It was his way. It was what he said. It was what he believed in. And my mom was much more open-minded. But I grew up between both those mindsets. So it kind of, you get a little lost in that as a child, thinking, well, my mom says one thing, but my dad says one thing. So going back to how do you navigate that trust and transparency, it is about being on the same page with your spouse or whomever, because you do want to operate your home in a way that has a certain dynamic. And I felt very safe with my mom, but didn't feel safe emotionally with my dad.
But your mom and dad were in the same house, right?
Yes, my parents are divorced now just recently, but I grew up in the same house with both my parents. But even in the same house, they were very different parents. And that's why also having my grandparents, that was an interesting layer, because it was my Nana, Papa, and my mom that were very unified. And my dad was kind of the outlier in terms of it. So I learned a lot growing up in that household. And you say, I feel like an old soul. I feel like I've had a lot of life experience that has ranged from, emotional problems, dealing with parents as a child, and then also seeing the positive side of things. So I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but I think it really does start when you're younger about how you are operating your.
Did they call you Flo?
Daniel, they did call me Flo. And
I knew they called you Flo.
They did. And I hated it so much that there's still people in my life that still call me Flo that are exempt from calling me.
You are not. I'm going to reintroduce you to why you are Flo. Think about what you just said about the family dynamic and being on the same. Listen, you want it all to flow, baby.
I do want it all to flow, except it just reminds me of Flo on the Progressive commercials, and she's hysterical. But I'm always like, I just could never wrap my head around it. And I'm named after
I got
almost good as Babs.
Okay, and just so you guys know, we have about 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh, I talked way too much.
I got a harder question.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so you made it's so funny because I WordPressed about this subject this morning because it came to me. I had a conversation last night with God about it, and when I have my conversations with God, I'm talking about when I pray, and so you said something about not that I want to get spiritual. So A, why did you say that? And B, if I'm inviting someone into my home to raise my children, how important is it that they do have a similar or the same belief system that I do? They're a great influence on my children. So, and the last little addendum to that is, do you subscribe to a certain faith? And if you're comfortable with it, what is that?
Sure. I love all these questions. So I was raised Catholic. I still would consider myself Catholic, but I probably am what my father referred to when I was growing up, a cafeteria Catholic, because I pick and choose, I guess, different things that I participate in. But spirituality has been very important to me and honestly has influenced my life greatly. I just never, Daniel, was a person that talked a lot about religion or spirituality growing up, because my dad was ultra Catholic, very, very religious. And it made me uncomfortable how much he talked about it in such kind of a fire and brimstone way that I never wanted to be like that. So I started to be more quiet about it and my faith journey, because I think we're on a journey about our faith forever, and it's always evolving. So as I started tapping into what religion meant to me, what God meant to me, what intuition and all different things meant to me, I realized, okay, I kind of made it work for myself. And I think that's my advice too to people, is you kind of have to find what honestly, revs up your soul and what keeps you grounded. And as long as you believe in something bigger than yourself, I feel like you're serving a good purpose in this world. But again, not to get too preachy. And the reason why I said that, Daniel, about not getting too spiritual was because I never, as a nanny, wanted to impose my views on a family. Though, to answer that third part of your question, Danielle, I do believe it is very important to vet a nanny based on values. So that's where I feel we're getting into trouble as a society today. You see this revolving door of nannies. Why is no one working out? Well, I feel it's because they're not. You have to know thyself, right? You always have to think inwardly. What's important to me in terms of values? And Daniel, every time I would say values to people, they'd be like, "Oh, I don't talk about religion, and I have my beliefs, and you have yours and stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, values doesn't mean that in this situation. I'm saying, what do you believe in terms of discipline? What do you believe in terms of education?" So yes, you do need to vet from a place of values, and I do think religion does have a place in the conversation, because you have to think about the nanny that's coming into your home. Are they going to be required to take your child to church, or are they going to be doing any sort of religious education with them? If that's important to you, right? If that's praying, that's an important part of your family, then you want to have maybe an extension of that in your home. Or maybe you want your kids to have a taste of a different culture, a different religion, so you have someone that's outside of that. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, as they say, but I do think it's important to have religion and spirituality as part of the conversation if it's important in your home. That's my bottom line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things that I need to bring up. And then after that, these guys can ask all the questions they want. But we got a good 12 minutes to do this. And so we're with a company called Stay Healthy. And the name of the show is the Stayhealthy Experience. And so we're very aware of a lot of the problems that are taking place around people who don't have health. And my first question, and I just want you to whatever comes to mind, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, is we know that kids today, in the next 10 years, will be the challenges they're having with obesity is on a incline in a bigger way than it was 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. And part of that has to do with screen time. I want your thoughts on both screen time and the challenges that we have with getting our kids to be healthy. And what advice would you have for parents, and what have you seen based on being in people's homes? Because I'm sure you've seen some of the challenges around that.
So let's start with the technology aspect of it. I will never be someone that condemns technology. I think technology is great. It's giving us, a way to do this podcast today, right? Technology, grows and moves, and it's wonderful. But again, going back to this idea of balance, I feel like everyone has a really hard time living in the in-between. And when it comes to technology, we are telling our kids to get off those screens, and we're like, you can't be addicted, and you have to go outside and play. But then we as adults are totally addicted to our technology.
Doing the same thing.
So it's like, do what I say, not as I do sort of thing. And so I feel like for parents, and I have to take this advice myself too, is you kind of have to show them what you're talking about. And I have a friend who's a working mom, an unbelievable working mom. And when she gets home from work, she puts the phone away in a drawer, and she's with those kids during dinner, and she gives them the full attention. And even if she's going to go work later, she's in the moment. And I think people today, again, these polar extremes, I'm not saying don't use technology at all, or, be on it 24/7. I'm saying find how it can fit into your family. And this goes into the obesity issue too. If at home, that you're going to have family dinner, and maybe it's only 15 minutes, but you're going to be off those phones and you're going to connect and whatever it is, then great. That's something you're doing for your family. That is a stepping stone to help you find that balance. Are we ever going to be, all disconnected from technology in a way that we feel is completely 100% healthy? No, that's not going to happen. I feel like, technology is only going to get better and more addictive. So we have to find ways that make it work into the flow of your family, where you do the old school meets new school, making sure you're present in the moment, making sure you're connecting with your kids, all of that. I've seen, parents at the park where their kid will be playing and they'll scream out, "Mommy, mommy, look at me." And they're on their phone and they're not looking. And I've heard kids say to their, well, mom's always on her phone, or, "Mommy, if you just look at me, just look at me for 1 minute, and then you can go back on your phone." And you think to yourself, what is that child ingesting? What's their impression of you in that moment? So that's so sad. But linked to the obesity issue, like you said, I think this idea of keeping kids active, it was something we did much more often growing up, and we were outside all the time playing. But I also think today, and maybe this is getting too deep, I see more often people talking about the emotional issues attached to eating. And I think a lot of the time parents are putting their own issues they have with food or nutrition onto their children, and it leads to an unhealthy lifestyle for them. Not all the time, but you said, Robert, what's my first instinct? And I'd say that's what's pulling at me right now, is seeing kind of the outside looking in, that there are outside forces that are affecting children today, and not enough education about what it actually means to be healthy. Technology also is a place that we look for influencers, right? We've got people out there telling us what it means to be skinny, what it means to be pretty. And kids are digesting this information so much today, and at such a rapid rate, and their impression of all of this is beyond measurable at this point. So it's not just what you're saying to them as the parent or the nanny about how to be healthy. It's what they're seeing out there visually as a representation of what is healthy or what is beautiful. So it's a bigger issue that we need to fix, I think, in terms of how our children are digesting role models and influencers and things like that. I think that will also help us with the obesity conversation, because I think that people think they can never live up to whatever that standard is, and so they go the opposite
like
way.
it's unrealistic.
Right, exactly. And so that's my first impression.
Okay. Well, there's some really good nuggets there, and so the part 2 of that, and then I want Daniel to share something with you that I actually admire that he does, and I'm attempting to implement it, which is really challenging, which will make sense when I explain it. But the first part of that is, what tips can you give people who want to get a nanny when it comes to screen time? And where this is coming from is, when I would have a sitter come in and they would watch the kids, and the sitter was amazing. Sitter came across great, everything checked out. And then I would talk to my kids and they go, yeah, all she did is sit on her phone the whole time. Oh, she's just texting the whole time.
Probably why they liked her.
Yeah.
They got to do whatever they wanted to do.
Well, actually they didn't, because they wanted to interact with her. They wanted to play dolls,
Yeah.
and all those things. And so I was like, so what do you recommend for people? I mean, the obvious thing I'm thinking is, you interview them.
Right.
Because we have to set boundaries also for the nanny. Right?
Right.
So talk on that for a second.
Well, I haven't asked you a question. Do you have not FaceTime, screen time rules in your house already?
I do, but that's where, because I like Daniel's rules.
Ooh, you better ask somebody.
I'm giving him a compliment. It's not
Hold on to it. Hold on.
This house is a dictatorship, and it's not a democracy.
No, I mean, it's good. I like Daniel's rules, which he'll explain, and because it feels right to me the way he has it set up. And so, my ex-wife and I are both really working hard to figure out how to make that work. And so I'm borrowing from his constitution, if you will, and making that part of our constitution in my house as well as their mom's house.
Right.
So can you just share
I
that
wanna
with
hear this.
Wait a minute, I was supposed to answer your question. So I have loose rules.
Okay.
But my biggest rule, because as a nutritionist and someone who specializes in getting kids healthier and families healthier, I understand that they're looking at me, and that kids will do more of what they see than what you tell them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I have my own personal challenges with my screen.
Right.
Because it's my business.
Right.
I mean, that thing is with me everywhere I go. So one of the things that I did recently was, whenever I go use the restroom, take a shower, or anything like that, I don't take my phone in the shower, which I used to.
In the shower?
Not in the shower, but in the bathroom.
Okay.
Like, it had to always be within an arm's reach of me. And now I don't. And I do little things where they can see that I left it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I want them to know that it doesn't go with me everywhere I go.
Like, we don't do it when we
All right,
eat.
so now, Daniel, can you explain and share what you do?
Yeah, I want to hear
Yes,
this.
what are these rules?
Yeah.
I'm very
You touched on the thing about, parents and not interacting with their children because of phones. Now, I'll go to a restaurant and I look at things that don't resonate well. And when they don't resonate well, that means there's something wrong with them for me. So the children get off the bus on Friday. One gets off at 3:30, the other one gets off at 4:30, in which they are allowed to walk into the kitchen and take their phone out of the drawer, and they get it until Sunday before dinner. It has to go back on the drawer. They do not touch a television, see a telephone or anything the entire school week, ever.
Wow.
Whoa.
Wow. Okay. That's
Make the time that they have the phone very valuable to them. It also makes, as a motivational tool, when things happen that I have to say, Did you do your homework? Because we have very much a whiteboard in the kitchen. There's no gray area. You come home, you have a snack, you do your homework, you go upstairs, you put your stuff away that's been washed and folded for you by me, and then you can come back down. We're going to have dinner and we'll have some family time, but no TV, no phone, no matter what. I've had to say the following thing, and with a daughter in junior high school now, this was tough. She came to me just last week and she said, I think it really hurt my feelings when you told me that you're not my friend. And I said, Avis, I'm your father. I said, and I am friendly with you. And hopefully when you grow up to be an adult, we'll be really, really good friends. Yeah. But please make no mistake about it. I want you to have input in the things and the decisions that are made in this house. But at the end of the day, I have the last word and I will make the tough decisions for you because that's my job as my father. So when I say to you, when you're talking to me like I'm one of your 7th grade friends, and I have to remind you, I am not your friend. Right. I'm your father.
Right.
So if I have to look at the difference between some of my friends that are more friendly with their kids and their kids don't listen to one thing that they say, and I have to look at my role as their father, I prefer to be on the side I am now. And so one of the things I would give my good friend who I love very much in Robert, and remember too, he's gotten away with it because he's got really good kids. But you make the rules, man. You make the rules. So you don't have to ask your children anything. You can ask what they think about it. Right. You can ask what they want, but you are the father and you make that decision. So if you're going for a popularity contest, that's different. I'm not going to win that.
Yeah,
but
me
if
neither.
You're going for, communication overall and listen, Robert's eating at my house. My kids set the table. I make the food. They clean every single thing up. They join hands and pray. I don't have to cue them on anything. That's the drill and the way it goes in my house. So, it's a choice.
It is a choice. And I give you credit, Daniel, because that's how you run your home. You're very in touch with what your values are as a person and how you want to raise your children and what the values of your home are. And that's always what I go back to is, as a nanny, I was not there to impose, again, my beliefs or my values on them. I was there to be an extension of hopefully what are similar values. And so I think in terms of screen time, what you're doing, I give you so much credit for that because, man, that is got to be hard to uphold. Wow. Even for a second, I was like, he's going to take away my phone. I need my phone. And so, I imagine what happens when I have kids one day, what will I do? And I remember our very good family friends of ours told us that none of her kids through high school were ever allowed to have their phone in their room at night. They'd always have to hand in their phone before they went to sleep. You two did. And I thought that was smart. And I said, you know what? I think I like that because nothing really very good happens after a certain hour on your phone. And, so I think that was smart. And her kids hated it. Of course, they hated it. But, again, children, it's for protection a lot of the time. It's for protection. And parents out there that are scared of technology and the internet and what's there, you should be scared. And can I tell you that, you could put every parent block on that computer or anything like that and nothing's going to happen? I absolutely can't give you that guarantee. Right. I can probably tell you, I guarantee you they'll be exposed to something you're not going to like because that's just the way it is today. But again, it goes back to instead of tips necessarily about how to limit your technology, because I could say lock it up at night or they don't have it during the week, like you said, Danielle, or things like that. I think it's more so explaining to kids why a decision is being made for them. That was one thing that my dad didn't really do, but my mom did. Or my dad was like, this is just the way it is in our house. And my mom was like, I'm doing this because.
She gave you a reason.
Right. There were the reasons. And kids still don't have to like it, but it helps you as the child understand where they're coming from. Again, it's about lessons for them to use later. As they get older and they develop relationships of their own and they're at work or whatever it is, and they have to learn to critically think about something or how to look at, different facets of a situation, you're helping them in that moment understand what were the things that were considered to come to this conclusion. So for me, it's never about one thing, right? It's never about just, rules, tips for technology, or it's just about keeping them safe, or just about that. It's usually a very layered reason for why you're educating them about something.
Right.
And so that's my advice with technology, is figure out what's right for your home, but then also remember what you're supposed to be teaching in those moments about self-esteem and confidence and respecting your body and respecting others and being sympathetic, all these different things about the influences that exist out there and how your child is going to interact and respond to those influences. That's what's more compelling to me.
Yeah.
And it starts with something as simple as give me your phone.
Yeah.
All right, Barbara, you got a question
I
there?
do. I want, because we talked about it a little bit, the whole guilt factor. So I want to go back to that, because I know as a mom, as a single mom, and I know dads have dad guilt too,
Sure.
but I'm sure you probably hear this a lot about the whole mom guilt thing. So I have this story. It was when I spent close to 20 years in corporate America. And I remember one of my good friends, she was married, and but we were struggling with the fact that we were both commuting. We had at least an hour commute each way. We, she had 2 girls. I had my son. And we were always struggling with the fact that, we were these successful corporate women, loved our jobs, but loved being with our kids and felt like we were missing out too. And I remember we were going through our whole merit, process, and the guy, he didn't handle it with a lot of sensitivity, but they were talking about her raise, and somehow it came up. He made a comment like, well, do you need a nanny? Do you need some more money so you can get a nanny? It's basically so that she could be at work more. Oh. And we were talking about it, and we were so offended. And I think it was because in our minds, our heart, we were thinking, we want to be able to do it all.
Right.
You feel guilty, feeling like, gosh, I actually need help. So for example, in my family, I was the first of the 3 children that I actually had to get after school childcare for my son. It was really hard for me to do that. And so how would you, maybe, I don't know, reassure or like tell women like how to deal with that guilt? Because it's hard.
It's real. It's real. And it's not even just guilt. It's the mom shaming that comes with it.
That
right?
too. It's almost like, what do you mean
big.
you can't get back for the school play?
Right.
You just work, an hour away, like figure it out.
Exactly. And it's the idea also to the moms that go to work and the moms that stay home. And, you would think that this would just be a community of, lifting each other up, but they're like, why are you going to have kids if you're not going to raise them, or, whatever the case is. And, again, being a nanny, you're there to support the family, whatever their dynamic is, whatever their structure is. But in terms of guilt, I always say, think of the things that your children will write in your cards one day when the kids are younger, about the type of parent that you are. And I have friends who are working mommies and daddies, or some of them stay home, whatever they are. But the one common denominator between all of these children who are beautiful, wonderful, being raised to be exceptional human beings, their common denominator is knowing that they're loved. And so it's this idea of quantity versus quality. And that's always what I go back to with moms, is if the quality of time you spend with your children is real and tangible and present, then you are doing so much good in that situation that doesn't help you take away the guilt necessarily, but shows you that you're capable of having a life outside of being a mom too.
Right.
And you can do all of these things well. And of course you're going to miss out on things. I know I tell moms that all the time. You can't be there for everything. You can't see everything. But these kids who have these working mamas, and one day having children would like to be that same working mom who will probably have a nanny. I would want my children to be raised knowing that they can do anything they want in life, and they can have different chapters of their life, whatever it is.
Right.
So you have to look at it from a larger picture of what are you teaching your children in that moment. Your son probably looks at you and thinks, I'm so proud of my mom for working as hard as she does, but that she loves me so hard too. Like that might not be something he articulates to you right now because he's 15, so he's not going to really get it. But I think that if that feeling is there, I know my friends who they work and their kids, I see how they worship them, and they don't feel that they're slighted in any way, that mom or dad isn't there, because the amount of time that they do spend with them, they are connected. So that's my advice to parents is being present in whatever those moments are that you're present and not feeling guilty that motherhood or fatherhood maybe isn't enough. I know that's hard to say out loud, but there are parents that have to work and parents that choose to work, right?
True.
And if you choose to work because it makes you a more fulfilled person, you are going to be a better mother or a better father or a better friend, because that's, again, you are important.
Right.
Fulfilling you, that is important as well, because that is a ripple effect and affects everything you do in your life. So that guilt I can't take away from you, but perspective I can give you.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right, there you go, you guys. Thank
Yes.
you, Daniel, for being here as
I know.
always, and
I
Miss
know.
Barbara.
Thank
and,
you.
Florence.
Thank you.
I know. It was so
That
awesome.
fun.
We've made it possible. Everyone has all of your contact information so they can reach out to you. And before I say goodbye to those who are tuning in, do you consult? Like, can someone call you from anywhere in the world and to consult?
They sure can. They could just go on my website, send me an email, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. Or they can find me all over social media, Windy City Nanny. So I'm here.
I had more questions.
Well, you know what? We'll have to do a part 2, Daniel.
About hot nannies.
Yeah.
Whether
About
you
hot
can hire
nannies,
them.
yeah.
There you go.
Nanny's going wild.
I want you to contemplate this.
Yes.
You mentioned 64% as a number you quoted earlier on a different topic, and that happens to be the actual projected percentage of the divorce rate in this country between the years 2020 and 2030. They project that the divorce rate will reach 64% in the United States. With that said, and the cliffhanger that we will be able to print up later when I put it in the form of an email and post it on this show, what is the role of a nanny in a household that goes through a divorce? Stay tuned.
Oh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun,
Well, you got it. As
dun.
always, you guys, let's get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy. Hello, everyone. This is Robert Ferguson, and thank you for watching our show. Now, be sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell so that you are notified whenever we upload new shows. Again, thank you for watching.